Really good. Thank you very much for those kind words. So it's the beginning of term, and so I'm not going to do anything that's very intellectually demanding this evening. I wasn't quite sure about this practice theory bit, sort of implying that here's a man who doesn't understand theory, so we'll have him on stage. Thank you, Mike. That was very helpful. So I think, if I press this button here, something will appear there. That's fantastic. Right. So I've been told, if I move my head out of the light, about 50 minutes of talking, which seems like a very long time, and then about 10, 15 minutes for questions at the end. Is that still, Chairman, the plan?
It might be a few more questions than that, but you'll be fine.
Splendid. Thank you very much. So I have these two particular job titles that I'll just mention now. One is as Professor Sir Mike Gregory's one of his successors at the Institute for Manufacturing, which is part of the engineering department, where we're trying to look at all the issues to do with how do you convert ideas and opportunities into products and services. And we have a whole load of stuff going on there, and we must, at some point, I think, organise a visit there, perhaps, which we'd be delighted to host. You can see everything we do there across the whole span from technology to management to policy. But I also have this very fortunate job, rather long job title, of the Dr. John C. Taylor OBE Professor of Innovation. Can I just have a show of hands, please, for who knows who Dr. John C. Taylor OBE is? That is so nice. That's quite rare. For those who don't know who he is, and I'm allowed to say this because I'm contractually obliged to, also because it's about innovation, this is Dr. John C. Taylor's core technology. And again, as many people in the room know who he is, for those who don't, this is the technology that is inside your kettle, and when you switch on your kettle, like so, I've taken this out of a kettle, it may not ever work again. There's a nice little bimetallic blade there. It's very simple. As it heats up, steam passes over it, it switches off your kettle. That's it. Has to work every single time. Every day, 1 billion people are using that technology. And Dr. John C. Taylor, what he did was, he worked on the design of that bimetallic blade, but also, critically, worked on the design of the machine that would make the blades, and very carefully protected that and kept it on the Isle of Man, where it still exists to this day. And if you listen very, very, very carefully, you can still hear a machine going ka-chunk, 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 and every single one of those is going into a kettle somewhere in the world, and every kettle that's sold, a few pennies, or quite a lot of pennies actually, end up going back to Dr. John C. Taylor, such that he can do exciting things such as, for those of you who are fans of such things, present corpus with their wonderful chronophage that you might have seen on King's Parade. That's him. He does many other things as well. But the point is, this is a lovely story of how a relatively simple idea, the execution of it, has led to real value for all of those companies that are trying to make kettles more efficient. You don't waste any power. It switches off when it's done. It's a very, very important technology. Secondly, some of you are able to see this, there's actually a second little bit of metal there. That's quite important too. That's the fail-safe. So when you forget to put water in, this one will go click as well when the whole kettle's about to melt, stopping it going any further, avoiding burning your house down, which is overall a good thing. So what I'm going to try and do in my 50 minutes is these two things. So I'm conscious that some of you may be expecting one of those bog standard talks on Cambridge and how wonderful it is and it's all brilliant for innovation and entrepreneurship, and there are others in the room, where's Shai Veerkanam somewhere, who could much better do a talk like that. So I'm not going to do it. Instead, what I thought I'd do is to split this into two parts, and first, just focus a little bit on what on earth we're talking about. Because this word innovation, as Mike said, is, it's all over the place. People just go, well, it's a good thing, and we should have more of it, and we're not really sure what it is, but clearly more of it would be good. So I thought, in a nice, gentle Monday evening way, just introduce you to make sure everybody's on the same page. I'm very conscious that some people in this room know an awful lot more about this than I do. And then a little bit about the fact that the world of innovation is changing. And that's important when we then get on to talk about Cambridge. Because if we don't have that sort of perhaps common understanding, we just end up having a puff talk about Cambridge is wonderful with a few problems. So what I'm going to do is, once we've done the first bit, go on to talk about Cambridge, a little bit of history, not too much, a little bit about what's happening now, but to pose some questions for discussion, because and I think many of us are very concerned of the impact not only of whatever is happening in Westminster at the moment, but the impact that Cambridge will be hit by, whatever may happen, because the world is changing very, very fast, and we should not be resting on our laurels. So, first bit first, common language for innovation. So it is very, very important. So if you just type in, why is innovation important into Google? That's not normally the way I do research, but it helps sometimes. You come up with phrases like this. It is fundamentally a key driver of productivity. It's really, really important. And it's going to be even more important in the future to solve all the problems we don't know how to deal with now. And this one happens to come from the OECD, but you could find 100 of these. So it's a really important thing. We still don't know what it is. So then you go, okay, well, let's do the easier one. What is it not? So innovation is not invention. And an example of that would be, go back to the great Frank Whittle, this lovely quote, the invention was nothing. The achievement was making the thing work. And that's what innovation is about. It's doing something useful with the invention. The invention is really important and very difficult, but it's not the whole thing. So then we go, okay, well, it's not that, that's good. It's also not that. It's not research and development. So there needs to be, in some cases, if it's technological innovation, some research and some development. That is very important and matters. But just doing research and development will not lead to any direct value. It doesn't lead to new products and services by some magical process of, I don't know, just something happening. There's another phase to this. And a lot of governments get very excited about R&D and go, ooh, we should do more of it. The percentage of our GDP spent on R&D should go up because then we'd be a more innovative economy. It's part of the answer. It's not the whole answer. And the third bit, I got this from one of my PhD students. She said, I've come across this concept of innovation theatre. Now, relax, we're not going to do interpretive dance or anything here. This was her observation that she saw a lot of companies who were doing the thing where you set up something in Silicon Valley. So you're a European, I don't know, automotive company, and you set up something in Silicon Valley because that's where new innovation is happening, and that will somehow miraculously make you more innovative in whatever way that may be. And so what you see is lots of this. And you go, of course we're innovative. Look at our funky bean bags and our giant angle poised lamp. And look, we've ripped all the plaster off the walls and you can write on the walls now. Those are tools to stimulate creativity. And they are important and they can be very useful. That does not equal innovation. That just says we've come up with some more funky ideas. And it's very nice. So innovation can be lots and lots of different things. If we just break it down by particular classes, we could do this for hours. And by the way, there's all the papers you could possibly want to read on this subject sitting behind all this, and I'm happy to share any of those with you. This is just the easy-to-digest version, as I said, for a Monday evening. This is the whole idea of product innovation. So here we go. Nice product innovation around a bimetallic blade to make your kettle switch off. You can have the service innovation, mobile banking. That's a nice example of a service innovation. Placement. Do any of you remember buying Lucozade from the chemist in a large bottle wrapped in cellophane? Yes, I'm judging my demographics correctly here. I do as well. That product is pretty much exactly the same as you now buy from as a sports drink. It's a strangely orange, fizzy, sugary water drink. It's the same thing. Innovation was placing it in the market in a different way. Then you have the idea of production processes. So particularly exciting for me is things like 3D printing. A new way of making physical objects. That in itself is an innovation. You have the business process side to it, reorganizing the way you do things to create and capture value. It can be about the way you are structuring your organization, perhaps moving from being very centralized to being very local and doing things on a more local basis. It can be innovation. I don't know what that word means, but it sounds very grand. You can have supply chain innovations, and we'll talk about those in a second. We can talk about platforms. So you do something on which others can be innovative. So in other words, something like, I don't know, the Google Play Store or the iOS platform and things like that, where you say, the App Store. You provide a service to allow others to provide other products and services. It can be all sorts of things. I can go on and on and on and on and on. Lots of different types of innovation. It's not just about the product, but the product can be quite important. And so if we pick an object like this and just go through a few examples here, I'm hoping this audience will know what this is, but could someone tell me what that product is, perhaps? The clue being that fuzzy picture there? Apple One. Oh, it's so nice to be amongst friends. Yes, that's the Apple One. That's what you bought. Well, you didn't get the screen, I don't think. You got the basic motherboard, and that was it. And it was quite popular to a certain category of customer, of which there are not a huge number in the world, but doing this made it staggeringly popular, basically making it a bit quicker, a bit faster, and putting it in a plastic box that looked really nice. And so the genius of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak was realizing there was some real hard technology development at work there, but actually to get it in the marketplace, you had to create a new class of product. Nobody was going, this kitchen table lacks something. Ooh, a computer, whatever that is, I'll have one of those. But it did, it transformed things. I also like this picture because it shows how far we as society and Apple adverts have moved on from man, him do clever stuff, wife do washing up. I mean, yeah, that's not quite so good. Then you have the ability to do it and do it again and again and again. So here is the Nokia product range from 1982 to 2007, very critical year for Nokia. And you can see they were fantastic, not just at product design. They were fantastic at rapid delivery of products through a very complex supply chain. So this was the era where you didn't have multi-purpose smartphones. You had different phones for very different applications. And you can see here, you've gone from the sort of corporate Wall Street type thing up here to this wonderful, colorful, targeted at younger people, the email only or email specializing communicator there, to the slidey one, to the, what else we got here? The very expensive one for very rich people, the one that was specialized on gaming applications. They literally said, we will have lots and lots of products, and our innovation is the ability to have global manufacturing chains connected together so we can very, very quickly see a market trend, build a phone, deliver it to the customer, and then change it a few months later. Absolutely phenomenal. Put your hands up, please, if you've ever owned a Nokia phone. Oh, my goodness, right. And if you remember, for those who were around at the time, this were the headlines that were being produced. From Finland, no less, Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Answer, yes. Because this, despite being a fantastically well-run and well-organized company, just could not respond quickly enough to the changing world triggered by the iPhone. Sometimes it can be very, very simple things, innovation. So here is a dockside from the 1920s, and here you have how the world used to be for transport. Trains would come in with goods, people would stagger around, offload things, chuck them on the dockside, some more people would lounge around and then load things onto ships. And that's how, and then you got to the other end, ship arrived, people came on, chucked it on the dockside, chucked it onto trains, it shot off again. Absolutely fine, very strong communities grew up around the docks, lots of employment, a very, if you could argue, a very healthy ecosystem, not that innovative. Innovation started to creep in slowly, so this is the 1960s, Liverpool, I think it was, and here we have, it's inside the hold of a ship, there you have 2 boxes being loaded onto a ship. Can I ask you to count how many people you can see involved in that process? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 boxes, 7 people. But, the serious point, it was providing lots of employment. Not the most efficient way to do things. Along comes a very simple invention, which at its heart is incredibly simple. It's a metal box of standard dimensions, standard load-bearing structure, absolutely brilliant, incredibly simple as an innovation. The genius was making that whole system work. And there's if you haven't seen any of those great TV shows or books written about the emergence of the shipping container, I really would urge you to read it. It's fantastic because it's so simple, the basic idea, and yet making it work staggeringly complicated, and that has enabled globalization. It's also destroyed the livelihoods of many thousands of people in those very community-based port and dock environments. So if you go back to this and say there's loads of different types of innovation, one thing that does seem to dominate if you read certain magazines, or in fact, if you just listen to the noise about innovation, these words and the like tend to stand out. People go, it's got to be radically disruptive, paradigm-shifting ecosystem, and I go, oh, this all sounds very exciting, not quite sure what it means. But there are types of innovation and problems and opportunities that need a radical, a disruptive approach, and we can talk more about those. But I think there's perhaps a little risk if we get overexcited by everything has to be a huge disruptive leap forward, we kind of forget that little things can make a massive difference as well. And to try and address that issue, I'm going to have to call on a specific hero from the world of entertainment, the great Bruce Willis. He can help us explain this. So I'm sure we can all agree that this movie is a genre-defying work of cinematographic genius. I take that as a yes. So Hollywood is the ecosystem around Hollywood is incredibly innovative. They are very smart people who are using huge amounts of money to make massive plays on creating new value through the delivery of new movies. And what's interesting is that they are very, very smart in how they do this. And when they do something that at its time was quite disruptive, a whole new kind of storyline of this was, what's the basic story? Angry man in a vest, off-duty policeman, shoots lots of baddies, becomes a hero at Christmas time. That's basically it. And this was very, very popular. So you could say, well, that was a bold step into a new storyline. Let's now do another bold step into a new storyline. But they don't. They say, well, that was great. Let's just do that. And this, we all laugh at this, but that's very sensible. That is one form of incremental innovation. If people say they like this and we can do it a bit better, why would you not do that? So basically, I think they kind of might have stretched it a bit too far to this point, but it was kind of the same story, and you can just slowly watch as Bruce Willis's hair falls out. But then they realized we can't flog this anymore, we need something new, and then the cycle starts again. So it's not laziness, it's very smart business sense. Why would you not do that? Whereas doing this, is incredibly courageous, and look at the challenges that Elon Musk and Tesla are facing. It's enormous what's been taken on there. Absolutely staggering what's got to be achieved, and yet, by doing that disruptive thing, that has pushed the whole world of automotive, which perhaps on its own would not have moved quite as quickly as it is now, to deal with this, because there was no incentive to. Then you see things like this. Any one of those, I mean, it is unlikely that the big hotel chains would have come up with that. It's unlikely that many property companies would have come up with that taxi firms would have invented that business, or that any food delivery company would have said, we can do this all by having teenagers like my son hurtling around Cambridge on a bicycle. And, well, let's not go there. Point is, there are lots of these business models out there that are inherently risky, but there are lots of opportunities for innovation that don't require such a huge leap forward. So, 3 very important words come out about innovation that I think sometimes get lost in all the excitement around Silicon Valley and disruption and blah, blah, blah. You've got to also remember that it's about executing. And we can have all the post-it stickers and comfy chairs and all we like, but there's still got to be the ability to do the good engineering to get the thing done. And that might not, for some people, be quite so exciting, but if you don't do that, then you've just done some invention. Anybody who's been involved in innovation knows that the word you hear more commonly than any other word is no. We're not going to do that. That's high risk. That's difficult. If it was that clever, someone else would have done it. All of those statements. So the ability to maintain activity all the way through to the market is very tricky. And then the third word is the idea of ambidexterity. For most businesses, they've got a business to run already. They've got existing customers. And many of those in the room who've worked in industry, you have today's customers, and you're trying to do a new thing as well. You're trying to exploit what you've got and explore the new opportunities. Either of those 2 things is very difficult. Doing them both together is incredibly hard. So, what I've tried to do in that first little bit is just say that's when we talk about innovation, we're not just talking about startup exciting Silicon Valley, we're talking about everything I've mentioned so far and much more. Then going on to the changing context. So, before we go on to talk about Cambridge, a few things that perhaps will be familiar to some in the room, that a lot of innovation, technological innovation, used to happen in places like this. Very large corporations with huge amounts of money would basically say, we're going to recruit the smartest people and we're going to bring them together and we're going to give them all the toys they could ever want, and they will come up with brilliant ideas. And from those brilliant ideas, we'll select a few, release them to the market, and they'll be successful. It was all about scale, it was all about investment, and it was all about protection. That worked really well. Until a few examples came out where it didn't work so well. So here is a particularly important graph for anybody who is involved in photography. So here's the world of film and film cameras up until the 1990s. So companies like, well, Kodak and Fuji and the rest of them doing very, very well. And then this weird little technology called digital came along and people went, oh, I don't really see this as too much of a worry. And then they went, oh, it's taking off. But that's okay, we're still growing, everything's fine. And then not so fine. And then this plummeting, vertigo-inducing collapse of the film and camera industry, and the staggering growth of digital was quite extraordinary. And particularly extraordinary for this man. So this is a guy called Stephen Sasson. And he is one of the inventors of the digital camera. And as you may know, the digital camera technology, I'm simplifying massively here, is one of the technologies that kind of ruined Kodak because they didn't respond quickly enough, despite opening up a lab here in Cambridge. What's ironic, though, is that that guy, Stephen Sasson, with his prototype digital camera there, is standing in front of the tower where that's named his employer. So he worked for the company, and his technology ended up destroying his company, effectively. I know it's much more complicated than that, but this is one of those very dangerous things. They were looking inside, they were talking to their current customers, they were listening to their shareholders, they were doing everything kind of right, and the world outside was changing so dramatically. By the time they'd worked out the speed of, they knew the change was happening, they didn't appreciate the speed of it and the impact of it. Colleagues from the business school can talk much more eloquently about that whole transition. But the point is, it's very, very hard to spot these transitions. So I'm now going to do a little mind exercise. I'm very pleased that we have someone involved in Tomorrow's World in the audience here. This is very exciting for me. So I'm going to show you, if I may, a couple of videos. And this is a video from 1967. And this is the video on a program called Tomorrow's World. Anybody remember Tomorrow's World? Ah, yes. So they were trying to show a technology and how it might affect the future. Okay? And so this was Europe's first home computer terminal. I'd like you to watch it. And at the time, people watched it and went, what a load of nonsense. This is clearly bonkers. It's never going to happen. I'd like you to watch it now and just listen to all the things that they got completely right. So off we go, if this works. Scary moment. Ooh, it works.
Early morning, semi-detached Highgate, London. Industrial consultant Rex Malik feels the business world's pulse from his bedside. Stock prices and market trends are available to him through Europe's first home computer terminal. This terminal is linked to a giant brain 10 miles away in the heart of London. It's one of two Malik has installed for experimental purposes, because he wants to know if they can run his life and his home for him. They're simple to operate, and experts predict that in 20 years' time, all new houses will be built with special computer points, and that terminals will be cheaper to rent than today's telephones. There's no complicated language to master before he can understand what the computer's saying. The unseen brain sends its messages in good old-fashioned English. Every day, the computer sends Rex Malik a daily reminder of where he should be, for he's stored his day-to-day diary with the brain. The computer can handle a year's shopping list for the home, final demands, and the exact state of Malik's bank balance. It could become a sort of robot housekeeper crossed with a private secretary. But so far, the Malik family isn't quite sure exactly how best to use it. But there's one member of the household who has no doubt of the advantages a computer in the home offers. He's Nicholas Malik, aged 4. Every afternoon, he spends time on the terminal. Mr. Malik says that it's helped Nicholas to read and count. Within 3 days of starting, Nicholas was able to send simple requests to the computer and read the answers as they came back.
P? Now where's the E? You had it
I
just
won't
now.
inflict a 4-year-old learning to type on you at the moment, but you can see from that little things they got right. So a data point in every house. You'll pay a monthly subscription to it. You won't need to learn a special computer language, you can just use English. The people who are going to get it first are the children. You know, it's all correct, and then we use it as all your finances will be done this way, you'll be able to have all your schedules sorted out for you. All of those things absolutely came true. So you got that, and again, people looked at that and went, yeah, but it's not really going to happen. The next one, I've got loads of these, but I'm just going to show you 2, if I may. This one is quite good as well. This is in colour, so this is the 1970s.
May I say, first of all, how much I appreciate your making time to talk to me like this.
If you'd be good enough to bear with me for a little while, I'll see if I can
Bear
find
with
those
me.
papers you want. I rather think they're across the other side of the office.
But it shouldn't take me too long to find them. If they're not here, they'll be with a colleague down the corridor. He was expressing considerable interest in a couple of things that we spoke about the last time we had the opportunity of having a chat. Though, thinking about it seriously, I'll bet they're outside the building in the vehicle. So if you'll hold on for just a second, I'll check whether it's in here, and then we can proceed a little further.
So people saw this and went, what? He's walking and talking on his telephone. And I love it, and I'll go see if it's in the vehicle. I quite like that as well. But the point is, people watched that and went, yeah, but it's never going to happen, not in my lifetime. And of course, what is most extraordinary is that all of that and much, much more happened, and not only happened quicker than we anticipated, did take quite a while, but has all ended up in one little device we stick in our pocket and use without even thinking about. So it's very, very hard when you see these early indicators for technological innovation to say, how's this going to pan out? And that's why we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment on this. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about isn't to do with the life sciences. It's very much focused on the ICT side of engineering and technology, but perhaps it's easiest for the majority of us to get our heads around. But this world of digitalization is now having a profound effect on how we design things, how we make things, and how we use things. So we're seeing this incredible world of physical devices that have lots of sensors in. I don't just mean your phone, I mean your car, your TV, your house, the way you go shopping. All of these things are creating petabytes, zettabytes, whatever the next one is, of data that's put into the virtual world, where people can then manipulate it and do clever things with it and produce better products and services for us. And this whole world of what has been grandly labeled the 4th industrial revolution really is quite extraordinary, but we don't know how it's going to pan out. So I'm now going to show you a couple of videos from now about things that are happening that are kind of interesting. So here is a Silicon Valley startup company that's doing high-speed 3D printing of various things, including shoes, which might not sound very exciting, but just watch this video.
Welcome to Carbon. We're a technology company changing the way the world makes things, specifically 3D printed things. We didn't start out trying to change manufacturing forever.
We didn't?
No, we didn't.
We started with the simple goal of making 3D printed parts better.
It's 25 to 100 times faster, which is game-changing.
But we quickly realized that with our combination of technology and materials, we could make real parts with mechanical properties and surface finishes that make injection molded plastics obsolete by comparison. Embracing the idea that speed to production isn't an obstacle anymore. It's the only way forward. And our partners share our enthusiasm for reinventing the rules. Partners who are manufacturing at scale, making millions of real products.
Like us?
Yeah, like you. In partnership with Adidas, we've created a midsole that shouldn't exist so that they could make a shoe that shouldn't exist. Light, super flexible, highly durable, and printed straight from liquid. A marvel of design and function, this shoe defies logic. And whether you want to make 1 or 1 million, this is true, customizable, and on-demand mass manufacturing. This is not a publicity stunt. This is a revolution. And we're just getting started. Stop prototyping, start producing.
So whether you want to make 1 or 1 million, now it's a teensy exaggeration, it's pretty hard to do that, but it's this idea of on-demand, customized products, units of 1 for each user. And that may sound a bit sort of, well, really? And it's not going to pan out quite like that, but it fundamentally changes the ability to, the way we make things. We can make them for individual people, but it also changes where we make things. Because why would you stick lots of these machines far away? You'd say, well, why don't you make the machines close to where the consumers are going to want to test and then buy the product? So these things can have quite fundamental shifts. And then you go, well, it's all just about little things, but now we can see very exciting things happening in the world of, car manufacturing, where many people in fact have tried this. This is not a model of a car being printed, they're actually 3D printing a real car. Now you look at it, it's quite crude and quite basic, but it's done as a publicity stunt. But for the automotive companies, they're looking at this going, yeah, this is not our business. We're very good at standardized, high quality, reliable, safe products. This has none of those characteristics, but it changes the way you think about your product, and then you could say, well, perhaps elements of this might affect the way we make and use things. So again, making this point that things are changing very, very fast, it's quite hard to keep up, and so, as a result of all of that, the way we think about innovation has had to change as well. And one key word has come out that describes the approach that has to be taken now, which is linking us to Cambridge for the last 20 minutes, where we talk about this openness, that nobody can operate alone for 2 reasons. One, you just can't do everything on your own. In this world of complex, systemic technologies, it is impossible for any single company to dominate and to own everything and do everything itself. It just doesn't work that way. Secondly, remembering from Kodak, if you try to do this, the chances are you'll miss something rather important. So, the world of open innovation opens before us, where we can say, look, if for all the engineers and product developers in the room, you know that you have a process where you say we research some stuff, we have some sort of stage gate, we then select some of these things to be developed, some of those things are then taken forward and developed, and then you have another stage gate before you decide which ones you will release to the market. And what you do now, though, is you say, well, we can do those things, but we can also bring ideas in from outside and blend them with what we've got. We can bring intellectual property in from outside. Others have developed and we can use. But we can also say that thing that we've got isn't very useful for us now, but we can let someone else use it. Or maybe we can even say that whole business idea, very exciting, not exciting for us, off you go and do it yourself, and we'll see where that leads. So this idea of open innovation has become a big thing for many companies, and we particularly see this happening in Cambridge, as I step back towards Cambridge. But it's very problematic. It sounds sort of elegant and, a nice picture, and that's fine, but the truth is, it comes down to things like this. If you are a large company, and if you are a nice startup company or an underpaid, overworked academic or whatever it may be here, it's very difficult to form collaborations and actually work with other people because it's really difficult. You have this problem of trust. And we've done a whole bunch of work on this around how do we help smaller organizations work with larger ones to do innovation. And a lot of people have come back saying, well, it's really difficult because it feels like this. There's the big company we're trying to work with, and we're this. And all these little analogies kind of resonate with some people where they go, yes, we want to do this collaboration, but operationally, at the execution level, it's really difficult. And this is where we do our research, trying to work out why is it so hard in practice to do this? It shouldn't be this hard, but it is. Then we've come up with lots of general guidelines, and we share these online and through some of our teaching and our outreach work. You say, if you're going to do partnerships, you're going to do innovation with someone else, number one, it's going to take a long time. None of these things happen quickly. Number two, you've got to be very, very good at communicating when things are going well and when things are not going well. You've got to be very careful to make sure you understand and document everything you've done with this partner. You've got to be aware of the trust issues, and you've got to be aware of the whole problems of working with big, complex organizations. But the good news is, the best solution is this. because we've worked out that these partnerships tend to work really well, not when people are drunk. What I mean is when you've built a social relationship, a social contract with the people you're collaborating with, which is great news. And we've kind of shown this in a nice, reasonably rigorous way, that having strong social ties makes collaborative innovation much more likely to succeed, which is great news. And then you go, yes, that's one little bit of it, but innovation for big companies is still quite problematic. And so we see big companies like Unilever and Philips changing the way they do things. And one of the ways they change what they do is by saying, we're going to invite people to come to us with brilliant ideas. And so we see at Colworth Park, down the road from here, and at Eindhoven, these big companies becoming more open to attract people to them. Frankly, that's quite hard work. And it is a strategy, and it has the brilliant title of a come to me strategy, where this is you, and you say, we want you to come to us with your wonderful innovations and ideas. A different strategy is this one, where you say, we are Philips, or we are Huawei, or we are Microsoft. We're going to stick a little bit of our operation right where all the innovators already are. And of course, a great example of that is exactly what's happening in Cambridge. So this sort of circular route to coming back to Cambridge is about this. It's about companies want to be in Cambridge because of all the good stuff that's going on. And that's a rather out-of-date set of logos there. And we see, more recently, more companies arriving. Apple, Amazon, Samsung, all turning up here. Why? Because they want to make innovation happen in a place like Cambridge, because they see immense value from what's going on here. And we can benefit from them being here as well. And so, as one of our very successful local entrepreneurs says, Cambridge is one of these great places. It's a safe place to do risky things, because innovation is about risk, and it is about failure, because very often the new exciting thing doesn't work. It doesn't go to plan. So how do you cope with that? And so we see something, I think, very interesting happening around what's going on in Cambridge. So, given you the context, given you the fact it's changing, to Cambridge. Here we have the traditional view of Cambridge, of course. I have no idea when this photograph was taken, but it appears to be in summertime, and there's only one punt on the river. I have no idea when they took that one. Maybe it's photoshopped. Point is, we've had that, and now we have the fact that Cambridge is very famous for its great engineering innovation, exemplified by the gas turbine, very well respected for its ICT, particularly microprocessor, and then GSM technologies, and now very much on the machine learning and AI side of things. Huge raft of stuff related to the life sciences, right the way from medical devices through to gene sequencing, through to pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. But perhaps critically, it's also about producing the people who can do this. That's why I always love to show this, not just because there's a connection to the Institute for Manufacturing there, but also because it is very important that an output of Cambridge is not just all this technology and science, it's the people who go on to do extraordinary things. And so, every innovation ecosystem in the world, be it Silicon Valley or Bangalore or Helsinki, they all put up statistics to say how brilliant they are. We, apparently, according to MIT and Stanford, are the third most successful innovation ecosystem in the world. I believe the first two are MIT and Stanford, as luck would have it. And basically, there are a lot of numbers to say that good stuff is happening in Cambridge. But perhaps it is worth a little bit of history to say that's the curve, that's the rough shape for the number of high-tech, innovative companies in Cambridge. And yes, we mustn't forget history. Cambridge University Press, Cambridge Instruments, Pi, long-standing history, and of course Marshall continuing to this day very strongly. But the point is, we've gone through a series of milestones from companies such as Cambridge Consultants being formed, and I'm sure in this room there is at least one person who works for or has worked for Cambridge Consultants. Is that right? Just a quick check. Yeah, of course. Of course. Yes, excellent. And then we have key milestones such as the formation of the Cambridge Science Park by Trinity College. We have the foundation of Acorn and Sinclair doing their great things around microcomputers, which push things forward. There's, who's that? Herman Hauser and Chris Curry, I believe. Then we had the publication of the Cambridge Phenomenon Report, and somewhere here is Bill Wicksteed, who can talk much more about that than I can. We then had the formation of St. John's Innovation Centre. Other innovation centres exist. I should declare an interest there. And then the foundation of ARM with those 12 engineers in a shed taking on Intel. That's some chutzpah there, but and did it very well. But also a few failures. People remember Ionica? Yes, a few nods around the room. So that was a very symbolic moment, huge growth and success, followed by bankruptcy in a fairly short period of time. But the delta, the increase in value of the business, showed that for investors, we could do things more than just at the small scale. And then things started to get organized in the 1990s, the late 90s, with networks being formed to show it was more than just a series of individual activities. And then, perhaps rather slowly, the university then said, oh, this is a good thing. Rather than just letting it happen, we're going to get actively involved. And there was the formation of the University Entrepreneurship Society, the Entrepreneurship Center, the Center for Entrepreneurial Learning, and Shai Vivekanam here. And all of these activities happened, which showed that there was now momentum building up around what was happening in Cambridge. So from humble beginnings, lots of fantastic science and technology, to being a very clearly innovation-focused cluster. And it's always very difficult to talk about it because it starts to sound like stories of heroes, and of course yes, there are key people, but it's about how the whole system worked that really matters. So I'm grateful to Charles Cotton for sending me this slide of just 4 particular stories: Solexa, Cambridge Antibody Technology, ARM, and autonomy, and just going back over those stories of what happened for each one of those. And it's a long story of some complex scientific discoveries and transitions and backward steps and then forward steps and changes in government policy and all sorts of things going on that lead to successful companies. And what's fascinating is if you break that down even more and say, let's just pick one. So if we pick Acorn, BBC Micro, and then the problems it faced, and then the foundation of advanced risk machines, I think that is there. Anybody from ARM in the room? Yep, great. I think that's the original. Yes, it's original. It was even apparently faxed to somebody as well. And then that led to the wonderful, kicked off by, if I recall, this device here, the Apple Newton, which is a phenomenal piece of technology, absolutely outstanding. I believe, Professor Gregory, you had one of these? Okay, denying it now. But this is phenomenal. This was way, way, way ahead of its time. And the 3 are now, who were the 3 shareholders? VLSI, Apple, and the third one? Someone else. Acorn, of course, yes. So Acorn had VLSI and Apple got together to say, we're going to make a microprocessor for this fantastic pocket-sized, if you have extremely large pockets, natural handwriting recognition computer. It is phenomenal from a technological standpoint. Please, if you haven't, have a play with this afterwards. It's really, really good, but not a commercial success. So that then led to a slight refocusing of the business to, yes, so I am completely wrong with this number, as was pointed out to me. It's not 100 billion, that's ridiculous. It's 150 billion, okay? It is, and that's an underestimate as well, I believe. So basically, loads. And then seeing the more recent stage of ARM, where it becomes a division of SoftBank. So this wonderful sort of innovation story where there's got to be fundamentally strong science and technology in the background, but a whole series of other things happening on top. And then we can say, if we reflect back on the cluster now, there's broadly 3 groups of companies here. You have the startup companies, the companies that are born in Cambridge or have moved here very early in their life. And here are some examples of those companies from CMR Surgical, who I believe have spoken here, Domino Printing Sciences, fantastic company, obviously, machine learning companies, they've spoken here as well, I believe. So some of these are spin-outs from the university, some are startups. Generally, that's the minority. Most are formed within the business community. Second big group are, of course, the big multinationals that have moved here, partly to be close to academics, but also to be close to all this lot and many more. And then critically in all of this is the role of the technology and the R&D consultancy firms, who do this wonderful bridging between what's happening in the labs and what industry really needs. What's also interesting, of course, is that some of these have created some of these that have been spin-outs from the consulting firms. And so this ecosystem is very complicated and very integrated and has been remarkably resilient. So if we take the fact that there are these 3 broad groups of companies here, we can then start to see this wonderful sort of positive reinforcement thing going on. Money comes in because things are going rather well. That money achieves quite a lot, and so more money comes in, and then more money comes in, and then lots more money comes in to build things up, and it starts to get faster and faster, and then we see, the biggest funding round for, what was that, Cambridge Innovation Capital coming in, and then we see the wonderful CMR raising 195 million, now valued at £1 billion. This incredible sort of excitement builds up around this. But that's very interesting. But I think it's also good to reflect on some of these things and go, is that really what an innovation ecosystem should do to become really strong? So whenever a story like this comes out about an acquisition of a Cambridge firm, there are two news stories that always appear. One news story says, this is fantastic, what an exciting liquidity event. Now we can finally release all this pent-up value, and it's now going to get even stronger as a division of the XYZ Corporation. The other news story that comes out, which is, what a total disaster. We've sold the crown jewels again. We are a bunch of buffoons. And both of those stories appear sometimes in the same publication because they're so polarized. Maybe we can discuss that afterwards. The other thing is, it's overheating a bit. And now these figures are a little out of date, but we see, we had the highest house price rise, we had the highest average house price, and then the league table that we're least proud of by a long way is we topped the inequality stakes for cities in the United Kingdom. That's appalling, I think we can all agree. Depending what we look at the data, it's a little more complicated than that. But this is very worrying. So we've got fantastically smart people doing amazing things, and yet we're creating some real social challenges as well. But then I'll go for a few nice stories and then end with a few questions to pose to you, if that's okay, as we wrap things up. So there is the wonderful story of Raspberry Pi, which I know they've also spoken here with Eben Upton. And it's great, a social need to improve the education of computer science and technology. You do a thing like that. I remember going to one of the early presentations from the Raspberry Pi project. Anybody here from Raspberry Pi, by the way? Right? So I remember going along and going, oh dear, they're a very nice little project. This is going nowhere fast. And they listened to me very closely and completely ignored me. And so 1 million later, I'm going, oh, it's a bit bigger than I thought. And then, 10 million. Well, that's very, 25 million, you say. Gosh, okay, well, I'm definitely wrong. To the point they've even opened up their own shop, as you might know as well. A fantastic story of strong technological capability, very smart commercial sense, doing something that is massively socially beneficial. Cambridge, I think, innovation at its best. Along with things like this, though, Simprints, a lovely example of a group of very smart PhD students, or Gates scholars, I believe they were, who took on this massive challenge of saying there are that many people in the world who have this fairly major problem, i.e. they don't have any formal identification, and so getting hold of healthcare services is almost impossible, reliable healthcare services. So what do? They set up a very smart venture, which is about a physical product, a fingerprint scanner, spend a lot of time working in the field with people who are actually going to use this, and then deal with all the back-end stuff as well to make sure it's really usable. Again, Cambridge innovation at its best, just like that. But if you also see how they did it, by bringing in the volunteers, by bringing in the community to help them do this. And we've got a PhD student who's looking at companies like this. It's absolutely fascinating, where you have the whole kind of social good and commercial good thing happening as well. And they were really smart because they didn't mind, and they don't mind, who claims credit. So everybody who supported them is a winner, because they can all say, we did this great thing for you. Be it MakeSpace, be it Cambridge University Entrepreneurs, be it Centre for Global Equality, whoever, they've all supported this venture, and it's going remarkably well. This one is just going to work if I press this. So for those...
Alstom Medical has developed a breathalyzer for disease. Every time you breathe out, you've got thousands of chemicals on your breath. And some of these are biomarkers and everything from cancer to infectious disease and inflammatory disease. So we know 1 in 2 people are going to get cancer. So we tried to develop a technology that picks up cancer at an earlier stage when it's much more treatable. One of the other big problems we see in cancer detection is how you make a test accessible to everyone. Some tests aren't very pleasant, they're invasive. So with breath, you have the ability to collect a sample very easily.
So I'll stop there because I know Billy stood on this stage and given this much better talk. But the point there is that's another nice example where you've got some fundamental medical research that needs to be done, breath biopsy, as well as product development, as well as a whole system change to allow this to be used in hospitals, along with all the issues to do with how insurance might pay for some of these things as well. So again, Cambridge innovation seems to be now wonderfully sophisticated that we can bring together the life sciences, the physical sciences, engineering around these interesting problems with very smart commercial people who can see the opportunity and understand the sophistication of solution that's needed. And so you then see nice examples also happening around the machine learning, the big boom area at the moment, but machine learning applied to healthcare to help identify the treatments for rare diseases, something that was just not economically feasible even a few years ago. Again, we've got these strengths now. We can do absolutely extraordinary things. And then we see universities getting, I haven't mentioned the university very much, but maybe just to remind us how far we've come in terms of university innovation. I love this quote. The crude engineer, the mere technologist, tolerated in universities because the state and industry are willing to finance them, tolerated but not assimilated. And so I think we've moved quite a long way since there, and if anybody cares about how far we've moved from the crude technologist being tolerated but not assimilated, we've done some research on this about how government policy over time has changed to support universities. We've also been looking quite closely at how Cambridge has been managing this system of innovation over a long period of time. But again, that's more light reading another time. And so, where's Max? I know you're here somewhere. Right, here. There's some great people who've been involved in trying to join up all the dots around all the things that the university has now got to support innovation. We've now found that there are at least, what are we up to now, Max? 40 organizations-ish? More than 40. 40 different organizations and activities across the university to support innovation. That's fantastic. That's a good thing. But there are three challenges on which I'd like to end. Number one has to be this issue of we can be brilliant at raising money, we can be fantastic at attracting the giants here because we've got some really smart people. We also, I don't think should be, I don't want to get political, I think that's a bit worrying that. We haven't quite balanced that out. That's number one. Number two, I think universities have a key role to play in this, but we're getting a bit confused about the role of the university. Our one here, apparently that's the university as well over there, I forget where it is. I always say this, old universities like Oxford and Cambridge, but then my colleagues from Italy go, yes, but Bologna is much older, so stop talking about Oxford and Cambridge. The point is, a lot of pressure on the university at the moment, universities, to do more stuff. And I love this quote that I got from David Teese and others, where it was talking about how difficult it is for academics now and how difficult it is for vice-chancellors and presidents and heads of department to do anything useful, let alone worry about innovation. Blah, 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 blah. University leaders, they are, for the most part, individuals of considerable energy, but they often become tired. Just go, oh, bless. But it's a serious point, because here are some examples of pressures the university is under. We have to be excellent at teaching. And not just we're Cambridge, of course we're excellent. No, we've got to be measurably excellent and measurably open and impartial in how we bring people in. So we have the TEF, we have the Research Excellence Framework. Your research must be excellent as well. So we've got the REF, and they've introduced now the Knowledge Exchange Framework, the KEF. And someone said the academics are being effed to death at this rate. I've just realized this is being recorded, isn't it? All right. So anyway. Then we've got very important issues such as the debate around divestment from fossil fuels, a really important issue that should be discussed. We've got the Office for Students pressurizing universities to say, oi, it's no good saying, of course we're as open as we can be, we are, blind to people's backgrounds for admissions, a little more pressure coming from them. And then you've got all the competition coming online. So the reason for putting this slide up is to say, the University of Cambridge is a key part of the innovation ecosystem in Cambridge, but is under immense pressure to do so many other things as well. And then perhaps the final one goes back to something that I think Bill Wicksteed shared with me a few years ago. So someone called Mike Best was asked to advise the government of Massachusetts on how they should build an innovation ecosystem. And the conclusion that came back was, don't be like Cambridge. Okay, and what? How dare he? But he made this point. He said, look, Massachusetts runs the risk of becoming like Cambridge. And you go, well, that's a good thing, right? And he goes, no, because what you'll end up doing is lots and lots of this early stage clever stuff and other people will come along, so we'll create the value, other people will capture all the value. Is that really a wise long-term strategy? And so those three problems, the kind of the inequality of what's going on, the changing role of the university, the pressure on getting the region's business model right, I think is quite interesting. And it does really matter, because if we go back to how we started, all of these things around innovation have been shown to make a big difference to the quality of life now and the quality of life in the future. We have to take this seriously. And we've got some major problems in maintaining this. And so I put them up as solutions, and I thought that's a bit arrogant. So 2 things to discuss. One is, how do we think about problems like this? And partly, we're not an organized entity. There's no boss of Cambridge. There's no single strategy. And so people like the great David Teese from UC Berkeley very smartly said, it's not about that. It's about having the ability to respond to change, to have the capability to respond to change. And so what he calls dynamic capabilities. The ability to spot something, sense it, to seize that opportunity, and then transform. And Cambridge has been, frankly, brilliant at this in innovation terms over many, many decades. We're really good at this. But I don't think that's a reason to say, therefore, everything's fine. So if people would like to know more about David Teese's work, there's a reference there, and he talks about this simple idea of sensing, seizing, transforming. But he says it does kind of rely on somebody having a rough sense of what's going on. And Mike chaired a wonderful event recently where we were talking about industrial strategy in different parts of the world. So we heard about industrial strategy in China, in Korea, in Japan, in Germany, France, in Italy, and then some colleagues came up from London to talk about the UK's industrial strategy. And they listened very politely. And I think it was our Japanese colleague said, well, the key thing, though, for a successful industrial strategy is to have clear leadership for your country. At which point, the entire room burst out laughing, which was a little harsh, including our colleagues from Whitehall. But the point is, we actually do have an industrial strategy. It's not a bad one. It actually says these are the things we need to do to make the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland innovative in the medium to long term. We then have individual sector strategies. We have one for the digital world. We have one for the life sciences. We have all sorts of strategies. And we now have our local industrial strategy. So we have people reflecting on what needs to happen. But I think there are some fairly major challenges to still be addressed. So the quick summary would be, the world of innovation is much more complex than the simple, it's all Silicon Valley startup and excitement, or it's all scientific geniuses driving Ferraris. The language, innovation is much more than that. It can be simple, it can be complex, it can be systemic, it can be a single product, it can be a service, blah, blah. It's changing because the underlying technologies are so integrated and so connected. We see it becoming a need to become more open and more collaborative, and Cambridge is a fantastic example of how collaborative innovation can happen. But I hope I've managed to share with you, but share my thoughts, that I think we're at a real point of inflection now where we've been really good, but I don't think we should be resting on our laurels. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll be very happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.